very, very few people would have suggested a winning strategy for a presidential candidate would include
I have legally used the tax laws to my benefit.
Refusing to release their tax records, flip-flopping on key promises.
I do not say that.
And I think it's important that
hiring and firing top campaign strategists.
I have no regrets as it comes to this campaign.
Tweeting near obscenities and retweeting links from hate sites. Leaked video that discusses groping women as a pickup strategy.
Grab them by the
Mocking the idea of the need for a ground game to win on Election Day.
We are going to win back the White House.
And all that's just a start. But as we all know now, that actually was, in part, the making of a winning strategy for Donald Trump. So, how has the campaign game changed because of all this, and does it cross borders? If there's anyone who knows campaigns, it's these three. Time for the insiders. Jamie Watt is a strategist for the Conservatives, Kathleen Monk for the NDP, and David Hurley for the Liberals. So those were just a few of the things that he did that surprised people. What surprised you most about something that broke convention, Jamie?
Well, you know, Peter, it's not that he threw out the rule book. I don't think he ever read it in the first place, and that gave him a chance to have a very different take on this election. You actually made reference to that, to it, and I think it was the absence of a ground game. People would have told you it was impossible to win the presidency of the United States without a very sophisticated ground game, and yet he proved that to be true. He had less than half the offices that Secretary Clinton had. In some places, she had 5, 7 times as many people working on that ground game. But what he's proven for sure now is that in a change election, like Rachel Notley in Alberta, like Jack Layton in Quebec, you can win now without a ground game.
This is what the Clinton team, Robbie Mook, said the day before the election. Watch this.
Across the country, through our efforts to build that ground game, register people to vote, and turn them out, that we've established a lead in some states that Donald Trump can't overcome.
Well, you're right. He overcame it. Kathleen, what's yours?
I think that Trump's campaign really showed that he took a blowtorch to traditional communication campaigns and campaigns. Normally, we invest a lot of money in paid media strategy, and this was kind of almost the revenge of the earned media, what I would call just media relations, and calling up cable news shows and getting interviews done. We wait to see kind of, what's going to happen in terms of the numbers, but right now, between the candidate and the super PACs, it's looking like he spent half as much as Clinton did. And so this really shakes up, campaign communication strategy that maybe people will devote more to that media relations side, the interview side, and having more access for their candidates, because he won on that access, I think.
People made fun of the fact he was phoning in to certain morning shows, especially on television. And others criticized the media, saying, you never called the other candidates. Well, in fact, they were all offered that same opportunity. None of them took it. So it goes to your point.
And similarly with his social media, tweeting, people are complaining he was tweeting too much, but his tweets actually, galvanized him a number of followers.
David.
Well, I think actually those two are the two most important ways in which he broke with convention. But there is a third that really troubled me and troubled a lot of people throughout the campaign. And that was his willingness to break with any notion of political correctness in the way that he described other candidates, the way he described journalists, the way he described some citizens of the country. And, we've been going through a period of very rapid change in terms of culture and values that has been going on. And I think it behooves us to look at this and say that maybe not everybody's moving at the same pace on the acceptance of all this change. And in an era where authenticity is valued, his willingness to, quotes, say what was on his mind or say it like ordinary people said it, seemed to be also a breakthrough rather than something that held him back, something that allowed him to break through and connect with people.
Was this a one-off because of the nature of the particular candidate? Or are we going to see this now?
Well, that's a very good question. And I'd like to just build on David's point on authenticity. We thought authenticity was valued. And I'm not sure that what we don't value is consistency, even if it's a contrivance. I actually don't think he's authentic. I think he is playing a role just as he played a role on The Apprentice. I think he learned how to be in character. And what he was good at was being consistently in that character. So I actually worry that we found a place where authenticity matters less and contrivance is okay as long as you're consistently contrived.
But does this become the blueprint?
Well, I think it might be it could be a correction. I mean, I think for the last 8 to 10 years, we've been so focused in campaigns on data, on metrics, on analytics. And what in some ways we saw with Trump was the pendulum swing back to message and motivation, right? He had a very clear emotional message that connected with a large swath of voters that hadn't been spoken to before and motivated them to get out. Lots of people have made complaints about Clinton and her message and her inability to connect. I mean, Trump himself, her main campaign slogan was, "I'm with her." That was the hashtag they used. And he would actually go to people and say, "I'm with you. I'm with you." And that connects with people. And I think that it's swinging back, if the pendulum goes back, moves back from data analytics and maybe focuses more on message and narrative, it could work.
You know, I talked to Tony Blair yesterday, the former British Prime Minister. He said the biggest thing about this campaign in terms of change was the impact of, watch this.
Whatever you call this new populism, it is in the end an insurgent movement that social media makes happen very fast today, at scale and at speed, in a way the world has not seen before.
So he's hooking it on social media.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that that was a huge tool, and it's something that's going to be much examined now. I mean, he used Twitter, and all of us, quotes, elites are on Twitter, and so we saw what he was doing on Twitter. We may not have been as alert to what was going on Facebook, and the amount of information, if you want to call it that, that was being disseminated by supporters of his on Facebook that is unchecked for fact, unchecked for reality, but is taken as just as truthful as anything else that is out there. So when we talk about the fact that he didn't spend money on advertising, he did supplement it with massive sort of social media pollination throughout the thing. I don't know that this is a template for Canada, because I think there's more dissimilarities than there are similarities in terms of the way the media is structured, in terms of the way the parties are structured. Just for an example, he never had to get 50% of the vote in any state or across the United States to win the nomination for the Republican Party. Well, there's no Canadian party that doesn't require you to get a majority of their voters ultimately supporting you. So you have to pay more attention to a broader message in Canada, I think, still than you did there. But I think the one common element, and I think that former Prime Minister Blair was speaking to it, is there is a real sense of economic dislocation out there. It's not as strong in Canada as it is in the United States, and you were still able to play it. It was a factor in our federal election, but you could still win it with a hope message. I'm not sure that will be true 8 years from now if people don't feel better about things. So.
Go ahead.
The other thing that the Facebook and Twitter experience has taught us is a whole different kind of candidate can emerge. You don't have to be of the establishment party, right? You don't have to be of a massive fundraising effort that sort of vets you and gives you the money to do this. You can run an insurgency, and you can come in differently in the end. Whether that comes here or not, we'll wait to see.
Does any of this cross the border?
I think it does. I think some of it already has. I would argue that politics more generally is moving off a policy battlefield and moving to more of a communication signifier field. And that's where the war is now being fought in this kind of post-truth politics that people talk about. I mean, there's examples of that in Canada that have happened. I think there's examples of that have happened in Europe with Brexit. I mean, we can look. I think it's really dangerous if we think that the message that Trump was carrying or the tactics he was using can't be employed here. We have to be aware that there's hucksterism that happens in Canada too, and we're vulnerable to that. So we have to look, when we look to our politicians, we have to ask for their policy, their blueprint. How are they going to get to the change that we want?
And not just
promise. Sorry?
Nobody seemed to be worried about that in the States. They listened to the key lines. The media was taking him literally. His supporters were taking him seriously,
right,
as Selena Zito says, who followed him, and that was the difference, literally versus seriously. And he get it in this era of post-truth, he was getting away with stuff.
Well, a year ago or so, there was a poll in the States done by NBC and the Wall Street Journal that asked people the question, would you prefer a candidate that was essentially a reliable purveyor of the status quo, competent person that would manage things, or would you prefer a change agent, even if you didn't know what that change would be? And more than half of Americans chose change in that circumstance. I'm not sure Canadians are that angry, but the seeds and the roots of that are there if we don't tend to it.
Well, and we've got 2 leadership campaigns going on now, so we're going to have the opportunity to see all that happen. Listen, it's great to have the 3 of you back.
Great to be back.
Yeah.